So I didn't come up with that. Where's Chelsea?
Right here.
Chelsea Frazier came up with that, and you never know what the gallery is gonna name your show. And when she sent me that, I was like, wow. I was really thrilled when you sent that, because she looked at my work and she put her finger on a phrase that really communicates how art functions for me as an artist. And I want to say too, there are a lot of different artists, just as a proviso, there are lots of different kinds of art. Art functions in different ways. I'm sharing with you tonight what motivates me and what guides me, what I do. So looking for a place, let me unpack that a little bit. I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan, sorry. I will probably talk about him a lot tonight. When C.S. Lewis was a little boy, he built this little diorama. I think it was like a little wooden box, and it had like mountains and I don't know, trees, little houses, little toy animals. And he talks about that, and at a certain point when he was playing with this or looking at it, he was pierced with this unfulfilled longing that he was experienced the rest of his life at different times. And he came to call this thing joy, which was if you know C.S. Lewis, it's a very important concept for him. And so the idea is that human beings have an innate sense that the world we live in, our existence, is not right. In a profound way, it's not right. Something's broken about it. But we also have an innate sense of something ideal, something perfect, some place or state of being where we should be fulfilled and experience like happiness. And his ideas, which I agree with, is that's actually, we take that for granted, but when you stop to think about it, that's actually quite strange. That there are these creatures that pop up in the universe, and they have an idea that something's wrong, and it's something that doesn't exist. We can't see it, we don't experience it, but they have an idea of an ideal of a perfection that they long for. So this plays out, of course, in religion. Most religions, this is the part of my brother-in-law teaches at Firm in religion. I believe most religions, but not all, believe in an afterlife of some kind, or like journeying to some place, or escaping from, the body, or coming into an ideal state of being, something. And then in pop culture, it's everywhere. I was thinking of examples. The first one that came to mind is, I love musicals, is West Side Story. That the end where Maria is holding Tony and he's dying, and she starts singing, somewhere there's a place for us, right? And then I was thinking about The Wizard of Oz, like everybody knows that when she's singing, help me out, how does the song go? Somewhere there's a land that I heard of, somewhere, right? And so those words, even as I say them here, they sound a little trite, don't they? But conveyed in art and experienced as art, they have power. They're compelling. Like those movies, how many decades old are those? And they still, you still kind of cry when you watch the end of West Side Story, So back to C.S. Lewis. When I was in college, I read The Great Divorce, and there's a passage in there about two painters. Has anybody read that? I'm just curious. About the painters? Yeah, and that was huge for me, that passage. And it formed a lot of my thinking and my motivation about painting. And basically what happens is, I wanted to read the whole thing, but I was like, Luke, you can't do that. But basically one painter, they're in a sort of heavenly place, and one painter is correcting another painter. And he's saying, look, you're going the wrong way. What first moved you was your love of light, and there was love of beauty. You saw something out there, that place, right? That you were enamored with. And So he's basically saying, another quote from him is, he's saying, look, you're painting woods, seascape, whatever, because you see glimpses of heaven in the earthly landscape. And so hopefully when you look at these paintings, you'll see that and see what's driving me to paint, which is basically, when I'm able to get out and just start looking for a painting, walking around the countryside or whatever, just like you or many artists, I'll see something. It could be something as simple as, this shadowed area under a tree. Well, like, that can really move me, and I want to paint that. I want to convey that. And I've taken C.S. Lewis as a guide. Like, I want all my attention focused on that. And this is just me. This is my approach. I'm trying not to think about my style or about, obviously you're trying not to think about your reputation or if your art's relevant. I'm like focused on trying to put all my love and attention on that thing that's moving me and capture it. And I think when you do that, when an artist does that and conveys that joy, I think it's kind of like a flag in the sand, him saying, look, this experience of beauty, of joy I'm having, this is not just some kind of biological reaction that's meaningless. It means something. It means something. So that's my little spiel. Before, I'm going to talk about this painting to start, but how about just any questions or comments just on my thoughts about looking for a place? Or I can just kind of keep going? Or we just kind of keep going? Okay. I'm going to take just a few paintings to talk about, and the first one is this painting. It's from 2007, so it's a pretty old painting, but I read, at that time, I read The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. Anybody read that book? It's an incredible book, but it talks about the four loves, which is romance, friendship, affection, and agape, which is basically charity. So I had 4 paintings that I tried to depict these as C.S. Lewis described them. And agape love, he says agape when I've heard him talk, is charity, it's godlike love, it's love of the unlovable, it's sacrificial love. He describes it as like that love that we all desperately need, but maybe when it comes down to it, we don't really want. In other words, we want to be loved for all our great attributes, but we don't want to be loved with that kind of love where we feel like we've been exposed. So what I want to say about this is painting operates on the level of symbol. It's not like film, it's not like a book, it's you've got one frame. And so at some level it's operating as a symbol. And so you're trying to come up with one image that's deep enough to convey the idea that you have. So every time I try to come up with an example, it's like, all right, a guy running to a burning building, a guy like bending down to a homeless person in the gutter. It's like, it was always cliche. There's a junkyard next to my house, near it, across the street. And I was walking around in that junkyard, just scrounging around looking for something, and had this idea. So what if there's this guy and he's entangled in all this junk, and he can't see outside this pit, but there's this a place, beautiful landscape. And this is from where I grew up going to the beach. This is the south end of Topsail Island. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's wild. And then across the inlet, there's this distant island, which I've never been to. And it used to just have one little cottage. Now it's kind of built up. There was just one little cottage. So the idea is there's this drapery which melts with that place, and it's going down, wrapping around the guy and pulling him out. And then I started to think about the junk around him, and I started to picture the things in life that maybe he has built his identity on, or that he's relied on for, fulfillment, that it maybe not fulfilled him all as much as he hopes. And I was picturing like art and technology, whatever, and then a lot of these things were right out of the junkyard, but there was that little throne in the junkyard that was broken. And so I was picturing the last thing that this guy's letting go of is the broken throne of his own will that he's finally laid aside. It hasn't worked. So that's agape or agape. So, any questions so far?
I have a technical
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
I love the story behind it.
Yeah.
So this is so, anyway, but did you initially know you wanted to do the junk monochromatically and the other, I mean, was that a decision that you instantly knew, or did you kind of come to the...
Well, it was definitely easier to paint monochromatic. And I did have the idea, I knew that if your eye was going to move, your eye moves along lines, it also moves along gradations.
Yes.
So in other words, if you gradate a sky, your eye moves along that gradation. So I knew that as I moved up, I wanted it to go from cool to warm. I don't know if you can see it, so it's bluish down here and it gets warmer and warmer as it goes up. So I think just with all the detail,
Yeah, it would have been lost.
it helped. It was easier to paint monochromatic, but also, I mean, it's junk, right? I didn't want it to be, I wanted it to be all the same thing,
Right.
you know? So yeah, I think it just kind of happened. I didn't even think about it, I just did it. Yeah. And yeah, that's a good question.
Hey, Luke,
Yeah.
kind of along those lines, I feel like you paint with the viewer in mind, so talking about drawing the eye up to
Yeah.
the painting.
Yeah.
And I think when you're looking at something that you've seen and you want to convey what you've seen to somebody else, how are you thinking about drawing the viewer through a space
Yeah.
when you're approaching a painting?
Yeah, we'll talk about that more as we go around, but that's good. That's a good question, Luke. Luke's with Hampton 3. He's the gallery director at Hampton 3. So, yeah. So, well, the first thing that comes to mind, I had a professor at the New York Academy. That's where I went to get my graduate degree. He talked about the crucial foreground. So the foreground, Luke's exactly right. The foreground is where you enter the painting. So it is important, the space, the space that you put here, and that there's not anything that's stopping your eye from moving into the painting. But like I said before, your eye tends to travel along lines and gradations. So anytime in a painting, and this is something we'll talk more about, even though I'm a realistic painter, I'm always trying to think abstractly. In other words, when I look out at you guys, the only reason I know there's a bunch of people out there is because there's a certain pattern of color, little pieces of color and lines that hit my eye, and those are the people. So as an artist, a realistic artist, you're trying to not think of it as you guys as people, but as pieces of color, and you're trying to tune in to that pattern of color, and if you can nail that, it adds up to people. You see the difference? So I kind of lost where I was going with that, but yeah.
Can I ask you, when you were talking about when you find the place that it's just, that's the shadow I want to, that's it,
Yeah.
How much of you is tied to faithfully capturing that, or at some point you go, I'm going to let that go because that's not where it's taken me?
All right, that's a great question because you just helped me segue.
Okay.
All right, there are different kinds of painting and different modes that I get into as an artist. This is out of my head. It doesn't mean that I'm not looking at things. I'll look at studies or photographs, or this was at the junkyard. I've got a picture of it. I'm looking at things to help me, but it's conceived. It's conceived out of my head. All right, so I'm having to think differently. If you'll look now, I want to shift to these 5 paintings on this wall. And you guys will have to help me if there's a certain one you want to know more about. These paintings, tell me your name again to ask the question. Cindy? She was asking, Luke, when you paint, are you being faithful to what you see? When I'm here, I'm having to kind of go backwards. Like, okay, I paint this, is that right? Is that right? Yep, that's right, I recognize that. When I'm painting from life, which I'm going to show you my setup down here, I've actually got a big easel. I've got my canvas set up, and the answer to your question is yes. I think it's Degas. I'm not positive, but he said, I think it was Degas who said, bow your knee to nature, she will bow to you. So when I'm out painting the landscape, it's just like I said, I am trying with everything I can to be faithful and capture what I see, the color. I'm not trying to like spice up the color, or I'm not saying that's a bad approach. Like I said, there are different kinds of art, but for me, I'm trying to get just to nail that color, that tone, the shapes that I'm seeing. I'm trying just as hard as I can to be faithful to what I see. And well, the problem is, let's go to Rip's painting, Rip Park Service's painting. The problem is, nature's always changing, like big time, and especially on a big painting, like you can do a little study, you can capture it, but if you do a bigger painting, you know, I maybe hiked up to this place, I don't know, I can't remember now, 5, 6 times, or I might have come 10 times to this place. Well, you can come the same time of day, but it's always changing. These shadows are shifting all the time. The plants are growing. Like, you'd be amazed at how fast things change minute to minute and also day to day. One of my favorite quotes, Ian Forster said, art's less like laying bricks, it's more like trying to capture a winged horse. And so I'm trying to be faithful to what I'm seeing, but like, good luck. Yeah, so I'm taking a great leap and trying, and sometimes you'll see something happen and you just have to, or like a cloud, like, and it's like, you just have to say, well, that's gonna be what I'm gonna do, you know? So the painting ends up being not faithful to one single moment, but faithful to the days that I came there. And I do try and come at the same time of day. I'll say just one last thing that I want to hear more questions from you guys. The light's really fast in the morning, then it slows down, right? Then around noon, it's very constant light. And as you get towards the end of the day, faster, 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 faster. And then especially in the mountains, the sun's sinking behind the mountain. It's changing just about every second. And so what I'm trying to say is, when you're a landscape painter, time is more constant at sometimes, and other times it's just like that. So that's, and of course, then you can start using photography and use that as an aid. There are pluses and minuses to that.
Could I add something about this?
Please.
What you educated me about, I thought this was interesting. There was, to hear what Luke said, is there was never a time when all these lighting conditions existed.
Right.
So he showed me that you paint plein air for several times, but you finish it in the studio a lot of times. And a photograph, I'm assuming what happened is you saw that shadow, it went off, and you saw that one, oh, that's good. And it went down. And so this is a compendium, and you numbered the photographs.
Yeah,
And part of the gift of the art is to assimilate it for an overall effect. And this was what was amazing, because you had the numbers on all the different parts of it, and it was faster for you to number. This is the business of painting. It was faster for you to number it, to find it on the computer, and go back to the lighting condition that you really liked.
Yeah, let me jump on that.
Okay.
The reason I had to do that for this painting is I'm down in a hollow, and it was the middle of the day, the afternoon, so it's pretty constant, but the problem is, as the sun's moving, you're getting these spots of light, they're just creeping. And sometimes you get like a little moment, like right
That's
there,
right, exactly.
and that's like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so he's right, I couldn't always capture everything in the moment, so I started taking pictures like, I want that. And I finally had to number the photos, like, for that part of the painting, I want this. Well, the problem is too, you can't just randomly start sticking in one lighting situation here. No, they have to be seen, like the whole thing has to read like, yeah, that works. Your eye recognizes that works. There's some lighting situations that just, they don't work together. So you call it a gift, I call it a skill. And I don't mean that as like, oh, I'm skilled. I meant it's just a lot of, any painter here knows, well, by the time you do something 300-400 times, then it starts, you get good at it. So it's not just a gift, it's like, it's just, well, you practice more and more doing complex scenes, and you get better and better at it.
I'll add one more thing to the story behind this. Is since this was commissioned, and Gallery 3, Hampton Gallery 3, Sandy Rupp introduced me to Luke, and we went out to lunch together, and since I paint too, I said, rather than me describing what I was looking for, I'll draw it myself. So I brought my little sketchbook and I had a little, and I still have that. And I said, this is what I want, the conditions I want, and the waterfall in the upper left-hand corner. And Luke, I remember, said, Rip, I'll never find that. And I said, Luke, you hadn't prayed about it. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, he was stomping through the mountains and he found it. And isn't that an interesting, isn't that an amazing little story?
Did that answer your question about the faithfulness to, hopefully
Yes.
that's, yes.
Well, I have a question, just plein air painter myself,
Yeah.
I'm a novice, but I'm just curious how many times you choose to edit out things that may not be what you would think attractive, and that intrigues me that you have that tension there between that. From here, I think that's a satellite dish, is that what that is?
Yeah.
And the bar, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably would have chosen to maybe edit out the satellite dish. I'm just curious, when you say you're faithful to what you see, I'm just
I'm gonna
curious
answer your
about that.
question, but I want to tell you a story first.
Okay.
This lady, it's her, there are a lot of paintings from this woman's farm, which is this huge farm that's just kind of falling apart. Well, it's a gold mine for me. But I painted a little house. I wish I could show it to you. It was on her farm. And it had the lady that was living there had just thrown out a washing machine. Well, again, I was looking at abstractly, that like white rectangle, it was like, yeah, I have to have that. And so I showed it to her. She's like, why did you put that washing machine? That painting went to Charlotte, to a gallery in Charlotte, and it sold like that. And I was like, what? You know, who bought it? So, well, this such and such part. She loved the washing machine. So the idea is, this is serious. You asked if I edit things out too, and I do it unconsciously all the time. But consciously, I'm trying to be faithful, because if you're faithful to the truth, in other words, what's out there, and somebody else it'll resonate with somebody else. Yeah, your
Well,
love for that thing.
That particular scene, just from a technical standpoint, sets you right up. You know, you've got your triangle and
Yeah.
the wire leads you in, and then you go, you know, it's all there. So I just think that's a gift for you to be able to see what's there and still make it, in a way, attractive. Who would have thought a satellite dish would be attractive? But it is.
Yeah. And tell me your name.
Tammy.
Tammy, I probably won't remember it. All right,
That's
so
okay.
Tammy, I'm glad you brought that up too, because again, when I go out and find a place to paint, let's say I get, yes, that's it. It's like, there's the painting. But then I spend a long time like, all right, what does it look like from here?
Right.
Yeah,
sure.
all right, let's back up because it's not just about finding a beautiful place. You have to find a beautiful place that has the abstract pattern or composition, whatever you want to call it, that makes a strong painting. Because that's what my destination is, a tomato garden. But the means to get there is abstraction. That's what conveys the power of the scene. So I spend a lot of time framing, figuring out,
It's obvious.
where I'm standing.
Good job.
So
Yeah.
for me, Luke, if I look at that, my eye comes to rest in the two bushes in the middle and the trees at the point of where the garden is pointing you. You have this, the perspective is pointing you to see that little meadow back there with the bushes, and that's a very pleasing to me.
Well, and I actually thought you were going to say this tree and this mountain, which end up centered, and I do find that happens a lot. Like something that's centered in the landscape draws my eye. There's a centrality to it, or maybe it's that whole thing what I was talking about, like seeing something ideal or perfect, or I don't know, monumental. So I'm oftentimes very sensitive to that central thing that's way back. That's pointing. It's all pointing to. Not always, but it just happens.
Like in the third one. It's up.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, any other questions about just this group of paintings?
Could you talk a little bit about the water? I know that you're gonna see water in more places, but could you talk about how you approach?
Yeah,
particularly
can we
this
move
one.
down to here?
Yeah, particularly this one, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Yeah.
So, remember how I said when I look at you guys, the reason I know it's beautiful is just a certain pattern of color. So people ask me, how do you paint water? How do you paint a cloud? How do you paint a cloud the same way you paint the face, the same way you paint water, which is you're squinting your eyes and you're trying to be brutally honest about the pattern of color that you're seeing and you're copying that. That's basically. With water, it is difficult because water is obviously a lot of times moving. So that's the short answer to your questions. I just paint water like I paint anything else. But I will say this. Hey.
Welcome. Hey.
I found in this painting in particular, the water's moving, it seems very chaotic. And I just found even in this painting, if I don't find some way to organize the chaos, it just doesn't work. So you can see this oval here, and that happens for other things too, like the way things link up. And I will tell you, for any plein air painters out there, I'm sure you've noticed this, it is uncanny how lines link together and flow in the world, even if I was going to paint you guys. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because there's order to the universe in general. That's the only way I can explain it. But I've got to a point where if I'm looking at a mountain or a tree or anything, I immediately look for what it's linking up with. And it's happening all the time. Like a tree limb will link up with the mountain, and it's uncanny. And what happens a lot of times when artists try and just make up a scene, it doesn't flow, it's like disjointed, and it doesn't feel real. Why is that? It doesn't flow like nature does. I'm not saying it always happens, but it's bizarre how often it does happen. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, Chelsea. Yeah, Luke.
You told me one time that water's really easy to paint once you understand that there's shadows on top of the water, on the bottom of the water, and then in the middle of the water.
Oh,
Wanna talk about that?
yeah. I was trying to find an example of that.
Easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have
He's
to-
right. I'm trying to find a good example of it, but like, especially when you're painting a stream with clear water, there's a certain pattern of color that's happening on the surface of the water, and then there's the lights passing through the top of the water and making shadow patterns actually on the sand or the rocks. So sometimes the illusion of water, to get that, you have to play back and forth between those two images. There are two things happening, at least two. Yeah.
Okay, can you dip back into your intro and the longing and it's God's world, and how, like while you're painting, are you hearing from God as you're studying something? Maybe too personal. You don't have to answer.
I was gonna say, no, we're hearing from the devil like this. Relatable. All right, listen, I'm just gonna be honest. When my wife knows, like, a lot of pain, to me, I can't speak to other artists' experience. It's a lot of work. And starting a painting is like, you take a deep breath because I know how much work's involved, and I know the risk, like it could fail, which really stinks. It doesn't feel good. And so especially getting a painting going, it just takes a lot of, for me, it's like pushing a boulder and getting going. It takes a lot of discipline and willpower. And it takes a lot of, like when I'm out there, I'm like, you're concentrated. It's a lot of concentration and precision. And art is painting's a weird mix of precision and being loose. It's a weird mix of those two things. And so when I'm out there, it's kind of intense. I'm really, and time's ticking, the lights, and so I'm really intently looking. But I will say, having said all the bad part, there are times when I've been out in the landscape, especially like when I finish, and sometimes I'll like, after like sitting for a few hours painting, so I'll actually walk into what I just painted. And there are times like, I wouldn't say they're rare, but it's uncommon. But there are times like when I'm in the landscape where I feel, I almost feel like in just 1 second more, I actually might audibly hear the voice of God. That's how close it feels. Like that's never happened to me. It probably will never happen, but that's how it almost feels like it's could happen. That's how and I guess I experience with Father, Son, Holy Spirit, just as a believer, I tend to relate most easily to God as creator. As like when I look at a tree, I see some people, my faith, I feel like it's really strong. Like I believe that He made that thing. So it's like, yeah, it is. Sometimes it is really great, but I will say those moments are few. They're not common. It's a lot of work. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of work, you know.
Don't you think like realism, photorealism enhances the intensity and stress trying to achieve a realism instead of impressionism or abstract?
That's almost
That's
a loaded
what I would
question.
think.
Yeah, wait, why don't you flesh it out a little more? What are you thinking?
Well, it's just harder. It takes more craftsmanship, more time to achieve realism to me. I mean, I've taken photorealism classes, and trying to get things exact is stressful. Takes a very long time versus when I'm doing just whimsical art.
Could I
That's
put
actually a really big question.
Can I put a layer on that?
Yeah.
To what degree do you wrestle with perfectionism in your attempts at capturing what is true?
I wrestle with it. Yeah, I'm actually feeling a tiny bit intimidated. Yeah, I wrestle with that. Man, I hardly even know how to answer the question. I hardly even know how to answer the question, because the more detail, the more you're. Well, here's one way to think about it. Remember, I said everything kind of flows together. The more, let's just say you have two facts in a painting. Like, I'm blanking right now, but who's the guy who did like the panels of color? It almost looks like a seascape. Somebody help me. It's like red.
Mondrian?
Anyways, if you're let's just say you're doing two abstract shapes, you can get a beautiful relationship. Like, not to downplay that. You can get we'll let you add four facts. Art is about like relating things in harmony. So the more facts, the more particulars that you're trying to put in a painting, the more difficult it is to get those things to sing in harmony, and the more you risk losing the harmony. So I always say the details are always in active rebellion against the greater fact that holds them together. So the details are always rebelling, and it is dangerous. You know, when you do a study, you can do something like really, it's like fresh and alive. It's like, again, this is just me, Michael, okay, as an artist. I look at a Bellini, like you think of it, I wish I could show it to you, St. Francis. There's a painting of St. Francis that Bellini did. It's so detailed. It's like so perfect, but it is not stilted. It's not cold. It's not like uptight. It's like everything is singing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, what a challenge, like to push the details, to push the particularity, to push the fineness of what you're doing and still have it to sing. It is hard, because the more details you put in, the more you're risking losing that fresh. I know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When do you let yourself just rest and put down the brush and say, it's done?
It's done. Again, there are different kind of painters. There's some, one of my best friend's a portrait painter. He's never satisfied. It's like he's what was your painting? It's like, I will be honest, when I finish a painting, usually, like maybe every now and then I'll do a painting, it's like, I hate this, I just want to destroy it, but in general, when I finish a painting, I'm usually like, yes, I felt like I somewhat captured what I was seeing. But to answer that question, when am I done, there was a lady at New York Academy, Martha Erlbacher was her name, and she said a painting's done when there's no more as in the painting, and as meaning, so there's no more as, and I get to a point where it's like, yeah, there's nothing that's like, I need to be conscientious, like that's not up to what I want. It's like, so I wait till that moment where I feel like I've done as good as I can do. Yeah.
That's good. Luke, a business question.
Yeah.
Hey, do you ever keep track how much time you spend on a painting?
That is hard. Yeah, that's hard to calculate.
Because you're very
The actual hours?
prolific. You're very prolific, and you have to.
I'm not that prolific, actually. You want to look at a prolific painter, it's Norman Rockwell. Like, he was a machine. And I just can't do what he did. He put, like, he would start painting in the morning and never stopped. Like, if I put in a few hours of actual painting, I feel really good about it. I can't just paint all day. I'm not that prolific.
But didn't his wife leave him?
Yeah.
He was a workaholic.
Yeah.
That's what did you say?
I'm not even sure how to frame this question, but on a scale of photorealism to impressionism, I see you way further down here, close to impressionism. How would you self-identify your style? Like, you had to describe your style specifically.
Okay, here's what I think about that. And we're getting into the topic of using photographs. Images are everywhere right now. We're like live in images. You can get an image of anything you want, and now we've got AI. You literally can get an image of anything you want and then copy the photograph. When I hear photorealism, what I hear is somebody's taking a photograph and they're copying it. I'm not saying, well, I've done that. I've used just one photograph and copied it and made what I think is a great painting. But there are limitations to it, and there's a difference between a realistic painting that's a copy of a photograph and a Leonardo da Vinci. A Leonardo da Vinci, you look at, like, there's a great portrait, and I think it's his only painting in the United States, it's at the National Gallery. It's very realistic. That's nothing you could ever take a picture of. It's not photorealistic. Yeah, I would say it's hyper-realistic, but it's realistic because he's using his eyes and he's just like zeroed in trying to capture nature. And like I said, you can't do it. You can copy a photograph, but, and again, not to knock painting from photographs, they're a very useful tool. But a photograph is not reality, and that's a lot of the problem we're having with technology in general. Me talking with you right now, that's different than texting or a phone call. It's like, this is reality, this is the world we live in. So I kind of apply that to painting as well, for me.
I had a mentor who had an analogy that speaks to that, because someone said, you know, if I'm painting a golf course or I'm watching golf on TV and the ball rolls right in or they miss it, and I'm thinking, why didn't they make that shot? And the mentor said the reason it looks different on your TV is because it flattened out the course. If you're there actually playing golf, it is not flat. So it's the same way when you paint. It's a distortion there.
Yeah, people don't realize it's not even necessarily so much a distortion, although there is distortion. A photograph gives you a very thin, accurate slice of information, but it's not the whole thing. So it can be useful.
But then there's the soul element, I think, that doesn't have anything to do with, I think.
You need it
like
all.
Da Vinci, I think that there's soul in that that doesn't have anything to do with, it's realistic, but there's something else.
And listen, I've seen some painters that paint from photographs. There's soul in it. They can
Yeah,
do it.
exactly.
You got to be careful making blanket statements about different kinds of art. I've definitely made that mistake in the past.
Yeah.
Should I? Let me.
Yeah,
I want to move
let's
on.
keep moving. I had a question that I thought might translate over here. Can you talk about there's visual realism, but then there's also an emotional truth. You know, like being realistic to look at, but then also true. Like, how do you marry those things? Because this is both realistic and not, but it's true.
All right, Chelsea, what I hear you saying is, it's one kind of truth to stand in front of a stream and be faithful to the abstract colors you're seeing. But art's not always just about faithful observation.
Sure.
That's what the Impressionists were about, a lot of them. It's like, they were trying to get that snapshot, they were trying to be super faithful to this moment. But you're saying, look, art's more, can be more than just observation. It's like art can convey story. It can convey if I'm critical now, like I think a lot of contemporary art can uplift anti-life. By anti-life, I mean I look at a painting, I'm standing in front of a work of art, and I feel like mud's being slung at me, and I'm being depressed, I'm being beat down, I'm being subjected to the artist's cynicism. That's a whole other realm you're talking about, and to me they are somewhat linked. Like when I'm faithful to see what I see, there's an integrity to that. That is spiritual to some extent, but like you're saying, art can like talk about story. It can talk about lots of things, and on that spectrum, I think you're right. I don't think art is subjective. I think it's complex. Subjective conveys that, oh well, you get your meaning from it, you get your meaning from it. It's all subjective. I concede that one person will see something somebody else did. To me, that's just because the truth is very wide and very complex. It doesn't mean that there's not still truth there. So I lost myself. But what I'm trying to say is, I do think artists, just like any other endeavor, any other work, they're on the continuum of how pure or how corrupt their motivations, their intentions, their content. They're not exempt from that. I debated with a friend of mine. It's like just because it's artwork, it's like it's absolved from all that. No, it's not. It's just like me sitting here talking to you. Like some of what I'm saying is going to hold water. Some of it might be downright evil. You know, painting is just a way of communication. It can be evil or good, in my opinion. Just because it's an art, it's not absolved from that.
What is the story behind this thing?
Okay, because we're getting pretty close here. I mentioned Topsail Beach. So my family always went to Topsail Beach, and my dad went there, my grandfather went there, so it's like really, it's the one place that's a constant. You know, I've moved around some, but this place is a constant. So we always went 2 weeks every summer since I was a baby. And we always stayed at like different cottages that we'd rent. So this is not a real place. It's it's kind of a collage of different memories and different things about that place that I love. And I wanted to be able to see into a cottage. I'll just show the main parts that were, I wanted this. I wanted to be able to see the landscape, that kind of rugged landscape of the dunes and beach. That whole scene. This. I wanted to see into a room. This building, to me, that's kind of important. It communicates a certain era of architecture. Looking through these woods, and at the south end, there's that island again. It's the same island, the south end there. This section, that's the sound. This is the sound, and the little fiddler crabs and this marsh grass. The sound, and this dock, and then seeing under the water. So someone said, what's the difference between realism? Obviously, I can't just look at something and copy it faithfully. It's done. When I look at that painting over there, all I have to do is just, it's there. All the problems are solved. I just have to be faithful and
Yeah.
copy it. This, I have to like come up with a way, how can I, in particular this painting, the challenge was, how can I get all these scenes into a space, a perspectival space that at least passes. I mean, I'm breaking some rules here, but I'm doing the best I can to make this a continual space. So,
How many colors did you go through before the purple? Was that your first choice?
I'll end up
yeah, no, that's hard. Like coming up with the colors for the interior room is hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually, I took a picture in my mom's house where I live in Waynesville, and the colors of that photograph I took is like, yeah, that'll work. So that kind of helped drive that.
Is that a picture of you?
No, it's actually a little boy in my church, and I got him and his little brother to pose for me. That was quite the adventure. I want to tell you about what the painting's kind of about as much as I can. I was thinking about myself as a little boy, that age,
Yeah.
where there's a certain kind of, you're still in the innocence of childhood.
Sure.
I'm not saying kids are completely innocent, that's not what I mean. I mean,
Yeah, I guess.
it's before you start to enter the age where you start to have some dysfunction, some problems, some difficulties. And so that's the age. And it's hard for me to articulate, but I was thinking of this little boy asleep. He's been on the beach all morning, he's sunburned. He's asleep now. He's been looking at like the solar system and dinosaurs, you know. He's fallen asleep in like this really quiet room. And yet all around the world, all over, it's like the world is moving all
Yeah.
around and the fish are going about their lives. And
Ocean.
I put like, you know, there's like a little mouse nest here and a mom and people playing on the beach. It's like the world's just like, the life of the world's moving all around him all the time, and yet his it's still precious, you know, it's like still really important, this one little life here. Yeah, and I've got this, I wish I could show you, I've got this scene in my, you can look at the video if you want. I've got this little scene in my studio where there's like an aquarium and there's a dock and a tower. It's like you can see all of it and under the water. So I think that started getting me thinking like, I want to find some way to be able to see under the water, into the house, like see all these
Yeah.
worlds happening at once. And that was the challenge of this painting. Let me talk about this real quick, some of the details.
Banker.
There's actually two vanishing points. This is a one-point perspective, and the vanishing point, that's basically where the receding lines are gonna converge, is right here. Of course, that's like a cross-like symbol, and I had it centered over this chair, and the chair to me was like a protective presence in the room. And so centered over the chair is this cross, but it's actually the fouled anchor, which is you've probably seen it in a Navy symbol.
Mhm.
Fouled anchor is not a good thing. So the symbol for the Navy is like, the reason they use a fouled anchor is because it's like preparedness for any disaster that's inevitably gonna happen. So I felt like that kind of tied in with the stage of life this boy's getting ready to enter. I wanted to reference again, I talked about the era of the house.
Yeah.
I grew up in a time when my grandfather, my uncle, they were like that World War II generation.
Yeah.
So that's a part of my growing up. The ship, I was always like into pirates and that kind of ships and kind of things when I was growing up. That's the Victoria, which was Magellan's ship that circled the world, so I felt like that reinforced that idea.
That's your own painting. in the
Yeah,
back.
it's a painting within the
Yeah,
painting.
I did, I self-referenced, sorry.
That's a tongue in cheek.
Is the portrait or based on a real person in your family?
No, now this is a place where the photography really helped. I looked at World War II, old World War II photographs, and then I found what I liked, and then I took it on like a Photoshop program, and I made it oblique, and then all I had to do was, you know, copy the way it looked. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, images and technology can really help with painting. Trying to think.
The easel, what in the world did you build a big easel for?
What's that?
The easel,
How did you paint
is it flat?
Oh, no, I do have a big easel. I wanted to show you guys my setup over here at some point, but I like to design and build things out of wood. So I do have an easel that I built in my studio, and it's hefty. It can hold a big, it can hold a big canvas. The problem is the room that I'm in is not big enough. So getting an even light on it was a pain.
Yeah.
Do you do any sketching before I assume you stretch this canvas?
I wish I hadn't asked that. You know, I was kicking myself. I had my sketchbook to bring, and I wanted to show you guys I don't really like to draw, honestly. I'd rather just paint. But
This feels like you had planned it out.
I had to do a lot of
A lot of
planning. So I'm just keep like, all right, change the size of this room. All right, wait, now there's not enough room for this. Wait, now put this bigger. Wait, this perspective's not working now. It's like I had to like redraw until I finally came up with a composition at least. Like one example is this. Like I feel like I kind of get away with the fact that this is here, then there's water. But if you think about it, this could never happen. The water just, the water level's not right. But again, it's like, I'm trying.
There could be a wall, we don't know.
Well, that's why I
Boards in there.
put them like that. You can't see
Yeah.
what's between them. So all those problems were hard for me to work out. Yeah.
The frame is amazing.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. It took a lot of work.
How do you figure out how, like, in set design, you know, you have to figure out how it's gonna read from far away, and so when you do a scale, how do you decide, this is the distance I want it to read the best from, or?
Interesting.
Well, practically, there's a thing called reducing glass. Do you know what that is? It's the opposite of a magnifying glass. And so in a studio, especially a small studio, you hold the reducing glass up and it makes it look far away. So that, and obviously as a painter, you always should be stepping back. Always stepping back. The only other thing I want to mention about that is, to me, a really great painting, this is just me, when I walk into a gallery, you see it from across the room, it's like, whoa, the big shapes attract you, right? Then you get closer and it's still feeding you, like Andrew Wyatt does this. You get closer, you can get all the way up and it's still feeding you, it's
A different scale.
it still holds water. Like, I'm not saying that's the only kind of painting, because obviously Impressionist painting doesn't exactly work that way, for instance. But to me, a really great painting looks great from far back, and then you keep going, and I do think it's a question of getting all those details, all those particularities in some sort of relationship that's intentional and it's harmonious.
And Luke, that's exactly how architecture works.
Okay.
Think about it, because a building from a distance at a certain scale,
Yes.
is just really, it's all put together, it all relates, and the closer you get, there's more and more detail and more, finally you're even down to the doorknob or
Yes.
the hinge. So it's exactly the same dynamic.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I've had students, the details are so seductive. In other words, just like when you're building a house, like, let's get to the sink and the light fixtures. Well, it's like, just like you're saying, it's like, if you do that, it's like you're just going into empty space and saying the sink goes here. No, it's not. You're gonna have to change that later, because you have to build the frame of the house, and then a smaller frame, and then you finally know where that goes. If you go to that detail first, guess what? You're gonna be reworking that, because it's not within larger,
It's not context. Just dear.
Yeah,
I know you always tell it, but I'm sure most people haven't heard the story. Talk about the king real quick.
okay.
Please.
Okay, what they're referring to is a place in my life where like I really lucked out big time. So I had I got to serve as what they call a tour artist.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time it was Prince Charles. So when he goes on state tours, he chooses an artist to travel with him. And the idea is he's being a patron to artists, but it's also a way for him to document his trips. So I knew I'd been on a painting trip with a British painter, and so when I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was 2005,
Yes.
he came with the Duchess to the United States on a state tour. And so they wanted an American artist, and he was touring organic farms because that's what he's into. So he wanted someone who did rural landscape. So I was just in the right place at the right time. She recommended me. And so, basically I was a part of this motorcade, and when it stopped, I would jump out and in my suit and with my paint box and would paint as fast as I could, and then we'd move on. And the golden rule was, Luke, if the motorcade moves without you, you're done. So I was trying to, that was my main worry. So I traveled with him, I think it was about 5 days. And the painting part of it was great. If I was painting, I was fine. A couple times he came, talked to me, and I was always secure in those situations. The social situations, like if I was at a party or a dinner, you were always so freaked out. You didn't want to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, and they're talking British all around you. I feel like such a, country bumpkin. So that was the stressful part. But yeah, that was that trip.
Tell me about the email you just got a few months ago.
Oh, they're putting together a show I think it's at Buckingham Palace, of all the tour artists' work.
Oh, good.
And so they wanted to, I don't know if they're gonna include me in that show or not, but they contacted me to talk to me, and that was a nice, it was nice.
If you had to pick one painting to send, if they said, okay, we're gonna we got a spot for you for one, what are you sending?
Oh, well, just to clarify, what they would be doing is they would be showing the paintings that I did on that trip, which are the paintings he has.
Yeah.
But I don't know what painting I would send. Probably one of the farm paintings, because he's really into like saving small farms. I want to say one quick thing about that though, to just artists here in general. My experience has been, as the farther I go on, that like sometimes sensational, exciting things happen and they grow. Like, oh, this gallery's gonna represent me. Oh, I got this grant. Oh, this magazine's gonna do an article about me. Like at the beginning of your career, you're trying to do that. But I found more and more, I'm sure you have, that those kind of exciting big things that happen, they do not really help you where it matters most. They kind of get your feet off the ground and destabilize you. The thing that I found that like where the gold is where you're actually in front of the painting and you're doing everything I've been talking about. You're just doing your thing painting. That's what am I trying to say? That's the thing that centers you and that makes you stronger when you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing. And the other things, they are exciting and kind of like, whoa, but they don't help you in that. They can actually hinder you in that process. So I just want to say that. I think it's really important.
Which one, do you wanna move to your easel?
If you got, I'll just show you my setup.
But just to say, I know you know Don Treader
Yes.
and how the water came out of the painting.
Oh yeah.
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 Can we all just walk down that road with you?
Oh, this one, yeah. It-
I mean, that
That's
That
It
is
seems
like,
like
can we
you
go
step
into
in
it?
there.
This is remember I was saying that I take a long time framing the painting. I know it may seem small to you, but it's actually important. You see how you can just see this little shape
yeah.
right above the roof? Imagine if it wasn't there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like it would just like disappear into nothing. I actually built it was frustrating because I had to be a certain amount far back and I was going downhill. I was like, ah! So I actually built a little platform so I was far enough back, but I was high enough where I could see that piece of hill. Yeah.
Wow. That's phenomenal painting.
And that farm, I wish you guys could all see it. It's just like that.
Yeah.
No, I have, it looks just
Yeah.
like that. I've stood right there.
Oh, really?
It's gorgeous.
It is really amazing.
I love this part right here. This part.
Yes.
Because the cows are right on the other side. That's what they're just feeding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? You know, the concession of photography, that painting was done, I took a little iPhone photo of that scene, and that's all I had to work with, one little grainy iPhone photo, and then I added all the figures. made up or taken from models or whatever. The overall scene was just from one little grainy iPhone photo. That's all I had, so it's like, I'm gonna work with that. Let me show you all my setup. Maybe, I don't know if it will interest you, but. One thing I should mention is my palette. Someone asked me about color. This palette came from my mentor, who's Ed Rice. Does anybody know Ed Rice, the painter? Yeah, he got it from his mentor. I teach it to my students, so it's at least 4 generations, but it probably goes back and back. And it's just 3 colors. I know it looks like more, but it's ultramarine blue, cad red, cad yellow, and everything's mixed from that. So the oranges are mixed from the red and yellow, the greens from the blue and yellow, and the purples, I have 2 purples, they're mixed from the red and blue. And I've added a couple other things over the years, but for many, many years, that's all I painted with, just those 3 colors in white. And yeah, so that's my palette. If you start, I mean, there's so many colors you can buy from the tube now, like they're super bright. And honestly, they're usually way too bright for what we see in nature. Sometimes they're too bright. They're often too bright. Like the greens are like way too like saturated. So that's my palette. And I mentioned like enjoying building stuff. So this is probably the 5th model of a little pochade box. So for little paintings, I can sit this one on my lap and paint with it. But I don't even know if you all are interested more in the technical side, but this is what I take out into the field, and I can put a pretty big canvas on that, and that's my setup. And that is, for anybody who paints outside here, that's half the battle. At least half the battle is having a setup that won't blow away and is steady. It's the challenge outside.
And since you come back, you have to mark exactly where you
Yes, the good point, Rip. Like I actually drive stakes into the ground on the 3 legs, and then I bungee cord it.
Yeah.
And so that way, when I come back each time, I can immediately put it down in the same place. Yeah.
Have you ever had someone rip up a steak?
Oh yeah. I had this was another paint box, kind of like this. I've had a cow come and grab the strap and start pulling my. I've had a bull come after me, and I had to run into the barn. Yeah, all the painting outside is. When I was a student, I got to go to Italy for the summer in college. I was so proud. I spent my money. I bought an Italian easel. Wooden. I was very proud of it. And I went up on the top of this, you know, they have these walls, these really tall, high walls, and I was painting a painting on top of this wall, you know, the Tuscan landscape, and I'm the artist, and the tourists were walking by, and I don't know, I think I felt pretty special, but here comes this gust of wind, like the whole thing off the top, the easel shattered, and the tourists were like, you know, I was just like, so yeah, painting outside's an adventure.
You said that you wanted to talk about these 2 paintings together.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Chelsea. One way I sometimes work is I'll do a study, and I'll either take that study, blow it up to large size, which is what I did with this one. This painting actually comes from a small study, and I liked it so much I blew it up. But sometimes I'll take a study like that and use it and make it larger and put figures in it. So again, I'm a perceptual painter. I'm really not good at making things up. I can't do, like if a little kid comes up to me at a party or something and says, "Hey, Mr. Luke, artist, will you draw me a dog?" I'm like a little bit like deer in the headlights. So I really paint for what I see. So however you can do it, from studies, photographs, whatever you have to do to get to where you're finally going to be, is how I have to work.
Did you have to train your eye, or do you find that you had some of that eye that then you continued to train? Like,
I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, I think if people talk about talent, I think if there is any gift or talent, it's just like, for me, I think it's just the way I think I do react emotionally pretty strongly to beauty, to think like a splash of light on the floor, that really can move me. So that's the talent part, I guess. But you said seeing. Yeah, the problem with seeing is we don't really see what's in front of us. And it's so hard to be brutally honest about the colors and shapes that are right in front of us. And it just takes practice and squinting your eyes to not paint what the thing is. Are you painting a nose, or are you painting the shape of the shadows and colors that are there?
Yeah.
The moment you start trying to paint a nose, you're most likely in trouble. But I think it's a right brain, left brain kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is a hard mode to get into, where you're copying shapes and patterns and not trying to paint the thing itself.
Totally.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
We started the night with you talking about the agape and the idea of like God's love coming right in the midst of this, and I like the spiral, right? Because that's our experience of people, I think, of faith, is that it is rarely a straight shot, right? Into love. Like, it is often winding. And you talked about kind of the call.
Always winding.
Yeah. The call of art, and like you giving yourself this saying, okay, God, you have given us this beauty, let me give you this back, and handling your art, well. Where have you seen God and his love do that to you through your career?
Where have I seen God's grace in my life?
Yeah, and just like specifically through like this art. It could be
Man,
like
it's kind of hard to know where to start. I think the first thing you're talking, it's a pretty big topic. You're talking about. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, I think it's I don't know, Christians, when you get into church, we want so badly to be sanctified and holy and good people, and we put on our church hats, and you said it's a winding path. I think it's really hard for us as Christians to be honest about kind of how screwed up we can be and how much we are, and we have to feel, in one sense, we have to be reconciled to that and be okay with that. In another sense, we're called to repent and strive to do better, and that's another weird mix, isn't it? Between trusting we're forgiven, yet striving to do better, striving to repent. So I guess what I was saying is, you said, where is grace? Just in my failures in life. You guys see all these paintings. Oh wow, this beautiful artist, you went to New York, you've traveled the Prince. Like, you don't see all the garbage, you don't see all the struggle. My wife knows about it. You don't see all the difficulties, all the faithlessness at times. You don't see any of that, and that's true for all of us. The other thing I'd say is just becoming an artist. It's like, it's more of a thing that kind of happened to me. So at first, like, should I do medical illustration or fine art? Or I'll try fine art. I'll go to the academy. All right, I'm definitely going to have to teach. All right, try and get a teaching job. I was trying to get a college position. All right, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, Renee knows, 4 years, 5, 6, 7 years. I can't get a teaching job. And all the time my paintings are selling more. Well, I guess I'm just going to paint. That's how it happened. So you talk about God's grace. I mean, God kind of moves us where we need to be, and it's like, wow, I don't know. But that's a very big question. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, that's you and your wife in the photo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good likeness. And that's hilarious. Did you have somebody take a photo of yourself? Have you done
I
that?
took photos of both of us and used probably, 4 or 5 photos of, that's Renee, my wife. I used 4 or 5 photos, and yeah.
It was a long time ago.
It's beautiful how you're looking at her and she's in the
Yeah.
light, and you know, that's a very wonderful composition.
Luke, my friend John, I don't know where John is. Oh, there he is. John noticed something when we first walked in. A shaft of blue.
Wait, where is that?
Like
No
shafts
matter.
of blue
Yeah,
in the
he
water.
asked, he commented,
Because it's reflecting the sky.
but, John, what did you?
It looks like there's a building behind the orange tree because the shaft is interrupted.
I can't even see what you're talking about, where it goes up here.
Yeah.
It almost looks like there's a
To the
building
right
back
of the
there.
reflection of the water, there's, looks like
To the right of the blue.
to the right of the blue of the water, looks like there's a.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. And that, yeah.
Ooh.
Y'all, I have to tell you, again, some things do get exaggerated sometimes, so maybe I'm looking at that shaft, do I see it, and you're just, and it does get exaggerated, but what I want to tell you about this, Luke Delilah knows, it's so heartbreaking. This landscape, I did a lot of paintings on this river, and this past spring I went driving by there, it's like, all gone, every bit of it. All the trees, the barn is just like leveled. And I got so angry, and there were huge piles of trees like burning. And so I went out there with my camera. I was like, I'm gonna make a video about this. Which I never did. But it is, you know, it taught me a lesson. It's like, man, life is short. Like, man, this stuff that we have to paint, it's not. It can change at any time. Like, that's gone now. I can never paint that again. So that did break my heart this past spring.
Well, it's love, like, that I feel, when I saw this painting, this was not, I don't think this was one of the ones that was on the list that you sent us to look at, but it was at Hampton 3. And I was like, I really want this one. I think that there's a lot of love in this, and, you know, that question I asked about, like, reality and truth, there's a truth to this reality that you preserved. Like, it really honors that place. And it allows us to honor it with you, even though it doesn't exist in this way anymore.
Yeah, and that happens a lot in art history, like not putting myself like in art history or anything, but you know, things are changing. Like you think about the Hudson River School. To them, they came to America and it was like, this is Eden. They looked at it as Eden and they started painting it. And it was disappearing, it was becoming farmland. Well, now I'm painting, farmland is disappearing and becoming housing developments. So it's always changing. Yeah.
You can always go back and paint the 44 identical houses they'll have there.
That's the cynical painting.
Thank everybody for your time, and you can stay and chat as well, but I'm wondering if you had a piece of advice for artists. I mean, I know there's not just one, and that's, in some ways, that's like the worst thing, but is there something that's really been a through line for you that you've returned to over and over again?
Can I just throw that question back out? Like, is there an artist here who can make that question more specific, or like a certain thing about art that you want advice about, or I'm trying to think. Maybe there's not. Yeah, Luke?
I think it'd be a follow-up to what we were talking about earlier about, like, when you're out there, do you feel God? Do you feel all of these things happening? It's like, no, it's just hard work. How do you keep the love of what you're doing within the hard work? Because I work in a different art form, but I know that 99% of it is just hard work. But if you lose the joy, you can't work at all. So how do you maintain the work ethic and the drive?
Oh, I know. I just thought of what I should say. And again, this is just my experience, but I think it is, I see it a lot. I had to practice starting. And maybe this will apply to other things as well. Like, starting is the hardest part, especially with painting. And I hear people, oh yeah, I'm a painter. It's like, I've been meaning to get out the brush. It's like, yep, I know what you're talking about. And I would Renee will tell you, sometimes I don't know, be distracted or just find it difficult to paint, or too intimidated or too stressed out about money or future. And here comes 5 o'clock. It's like, I know I have a half an hour before supper. It's like, you know what? I'm just gonna practice starting right now.
Yeah.
I've got 15 minutes. I'm gonna get out my paints, get out the canvas, just And so I practiced starting over and over and over, and gradually I got better at, all right, a lot of times when you just start, you get momentum. But you get better and better at starting and continuing and keeping the ball rolling. But anyways, that's, as far as a practical thing, I think that's an important one to just practice starting.
I have a quick technical question.
bathroom here.
Are the underpaintings the same for each of these, or do you, because I know that it's sort of like almost a taupe color for the Sacred Hollow.
I took it back to the car. Yeah, I always paint on a tone ground. Tone ground just means like a medium toned canvas. The reason is, if you, at least for me, if you paint on white, if I put this color right here, that's a pretty bright color. If I put that here, it looks dark. And so painting on a toned ground, you immediately, when you put the white on there, the light in the sky, you immediately can see it. Otherwise, it's very difficult to see the light relationships until you cover up every little piece of white. Because white's the brightest color we have. It's like a symbol clash. So you've got all these little symbol clashes all in the painting. That's just me and how I think about tone. But let me just say one other thing. In realistic painting, especially in like the ateliers, for those of you who don't know, it's like very, for lack of better word, conservative. They're in the master techniques. Like they're all about like all the different layers, starting with grisaille. My own principle is like what I heard in Captain Aubrey. They were talking about Horatio Nelson. And it's like, what's your tactic? He's like, we go straight at the enemy. And that's how I paint now. I used to do a lot of like, oh, let's do the grisaille first, and then this. I'll do a tonal paint first, then add the colors. It's like, whatever I'm trying to do, I see the end result, I'm trying to go directly to that as straight as I can, like, put it down. That's just me. That's how and so that's what I try and do. Straight at the enemy.
So sorry, but I just have to ask this. I want to believe you. I believe you use 3 colors.
I almost got through this talk with a difficult question. Somebody give me a hard time.
So I was trained in a bad era of oil painting, but I never ever use ivory black, and you make your blacks from ultramarine blue and sepia or cad, no, not cad, alizarin and phthalo green. So those make really rich blacks, but don't use black. And so I know you said you use 3 colors, but I think cadmium and ultramarine kind of make an eggplant purpley. And I don't know how you achieve blacks. So is that a secret too?
Black, I mean, I think you're right. Whenever I use just black out of a tube, I don't know what it is about it, but it has a deadness to it, just to me.
Okay.
And listen, black to me, I don't think about black in terms of a black color. I just think about it as darkness.
Okay.
And whatever the darkness is, I'm just painting darkness, and I just paint that color. And you can make dark paint just about anything. You mentioned some combinations, but you can take any number of things and make darkness out of those paints. So I don't even think in terms of black. I just think in terms of darkness, and you can just create that with combining different colors. But I usually I don't think I ever paint with black.
But you do use white, you said.
White is, what's the guy, who's the guy who did the video, Chelsea? Where is Chelsea?
Yeah, right here.
Jimmy Olmsted.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
He was saying, he was like, we were talking, he's a videographer, and he was talking about light in his work. It's like, light is the currency of visual arts. It's the current. So white is the brightest light we have. I can't actually paint with light itself. I don't have that in my arsenal. All the whitest thing I've got is this, and everything has to go down from there. It's a limitation. So white paint and getting the brightness of things, you're always trying to build up your brights. Yeah, and build up the light in the painting. So any kind of light paint, white is very important. That's the currency of what you're painting. That's how we see with light.
Well, yeah, we